FABELMANS, a great movie produced by Steven Spielberg. It tells us a story how he became the famous movie director that he is right now. But it also tells us a story about his early life, about his family, his struggles, and so on. But besides beautiful images, great directing, great acting, there is one aspect of this movie that I'm interested in particular today. And that aspect is color. And today we're going to try to reproduce that color using our amateur images. And of course we're going to do that using DaVinci Resolve. So let's open it and dive in. So what are we doing today? Today we are trying to replicate the FABELMANS look. And before we start doing anything inside DaVinci Resolve, we need to go to the movie itself and grab a couple of reference frames. It is a great practice regardless whether you try to build a certain look or you're just looking for an inspiration. It is a really good practice to analyze movies that just look gorgeous and find piece of color or color scheme that you want to use later in your projects. So we're going to analyze our parades, our Vectorscope, but before that we need another piece of information, and that is what was used to capture this image. And in this particular instance they use a 35mm film. This piece of information is quite important because there are some effects that characteristics of film in particular, and we're going to replicate them because we know that what they used was 35mm film. So let's get to grading. This image is what I ended up with when I was preparing for this tutorial. We're going to delete all of that and we're going to start right from the beginning. First of all, we need to balance the image. This is the first step in every color grading process. We're going to go to the raw tab and select a color temperature that we think fits our scene the most. In this particular instance, I already set it to 3250, and we're going to continue further. I'm going to use my micro panel, but I'm going to highlight everything that I'm using right now at this very moment. You can replicate everything I do using just your mouse and these controls, but it is much more convenient to use a dedicated panel. We need to bear in mind that our image is pretty dark, so we're not going to stretch it to 1023 or 896. We're going to bear in mind once we're doing our balance that this is going to be a quite dark image. So let's try to balance our image. First we're going to introduce some contrast and lift up the shadows a little bit to see some details, because we do not want those details to be lost inside of those really black shadows. And also we're going to subtract our pinkish magenta color from our footage to make it more kind of neutral. Yeah, that looks pretty much okay. So this is a pretty basic balance. I'm not going to do a lot in here. The most chunk of our work is going to be done in the node number 2. So let's go to the reference image. Let's go to this one and let's try to analyze it. I have to mention that you are not going to get really one-to-one replica of what you're trying to mimic, because to achieve an image that looks exactly like it, you need to use the same color, you need to diffuse light like they diffused it, and so on and so forth. What we try to do is to use any camera and film under any conditions and try to mimic that particular color scheme that we're seeing in the movie. So we're going to use every DaVinci Resolve tool that is available that is going to facilitate our procedure. So let's analyze what is happening here. We're going to go to Vectorscope and we're going to notice that one part of the image is leaning towards teal color, teal greenish color, and the other part of the image is going to lean to the yellowish orangey part, but it's not going to lie perfectly on the skin tone indicator. It's leaning a little bit to the left, meaning to the yellow parts of the color spectrum. So this is what we will try to do with our image. Let's disable that and let's try to do that. I'm going to use HDR Wheels. In particular, I'm going to use a global wheel, and I'm going to push everything in this teal kind of territory. Let's have a look at our Vectorscope, how everything is moving towards teal. not afraid, we're not going to lose our skin tones. We will get back to them momentarily. So these are our teals. We're going to get back to the primaries, and now we're going to use gain to reintroduce some of the color that we lost in our skin tones, meaning orangey yellow color, something like that. Going to reintroduce that. Now let's head back. We're just doing basic push and pull. Let's head back to the HDR and let's reintroduce some of the teal color to the image. I'm using the global wheel. Right, let's head back to the primaries and reintroduce our gain, our color into the skin tones. As you can see, it is kind of resembles what was happening in the original image, but we're gonna move it closer to yellowish like color. Yeah, something like that. But what we have here is an additional problem. I'm going to address that, but first I'm going to share with you something that is going to help you get your skin tones in the area that you want. If you're having troubles getting your skin tones to obtain correct color, you're gonna go to hue versus hue, select red, yellow, and isolate greens, and you're going to select something in here that resembles skin tones and move it to the needed direction. This way you are rotating the hues and you are pushing the colors of your skin, of the skin of your subject, towards the color that you want. If you need to find a control, you can use hue rotate. This way we can make it a bit more yellowish. And look at the Vectorscope. When I move it like this, it's moving towards yellow. This is towards pink, magenta. So let's introduce a little bit of yellowish tint to the skin tones. Right. Now we've got a little problem in here. We need to counteract that. We've tinted our shadows. The really deep black shadows are supposed to stay black no matter what. No matter what kind of color grading you do, those shadows should remain neutral. So we're gonna create additional node and go to the log wheels. And we're going to push our shadows in the opposite direction, meaning towards something like orangey, magenta color. But now we've neutralized the whole image. We do not really want to do that, so we're going to use our range to control to what extent we want to neutralize our colors. I want to neutralize that color and a little bit in this kind of shadowy part, so something like that. Now our basic look is done. This is just basic look. Let's try to introduce some of the effects that we have when we film something using film. So the first one is glow. Let's drop it. I use this effect really often, even if I'm not trying to mimic like the film effect. So we're going to introduce a little bit of glow to our skin tones. Let's increase our gamma just a little bit and let's split the difference. The phrase that colorists, they really hate when the director says, hey, split the difference. Nobody knows what it means, but we're gonna do that. Now we also can notice that our image is a little bit more saturated than our reference. So we're gonna go to the previous node and we're going to reduce saturation, but we are not going to reduce saturation to the whole image because the teal part is really saturated, but this yellowish orangey part is desaturated. So we're gonna go to hue versus sat. We're going to preserve our blue and we are going to move, and even green, we're going to preserve green as well, and the rest we're going to desaturate that a little bit. So our skin tones and the color that is similar to skin tones is going to be desaturated. We do not want to create something like zigzagging here because it's going to introduce a lot of noise and potentially break some parts of the image. We're going to just a little bit just desaturate this part. Yeah, something like that. Now let's move forward to the next effect, which is which is halation. In this particular shot, we're not going to notice any halation because we do not have really bright spots in here. But in this image we have bright spots, and if you've watched this movie, you've noticed that there is a lot of halation in there. So we're going to introduce one in here. Now we're going to refine it and make so that only the brightest part is going to obtain this halation characteristic, because we do not want the halation to cover our subject entirely. Only the brightest portion that is naturally going to emit this halation thing. Right. The last effect that we're gonna use is called film grain. We know that it was shot. Whoops. It was shot on a 35mm film, so let's go to 35mm, and the preset, I do not really like it. This is just a starting point, so I'm going to move the texture. Now let's increase the strength. We're going to increase it too much and then go back. When you want to see how it's going, you need to play that. Yeah, something like that. So, and the only thing that I can think of is we can reduce our noise, because noise and grain, they are not similar. They are totally two different things. Going to explain to you why. So the noise looks awful. It is the signal that is different pixels of different colors dancing in the shadows. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to see it. It looks awful. We want to generally reduce it. And grain, this is the byproduct of developing a film, and this is characteristic that adds this cinematic part to the image, cinematic characteristic to the image. So usually we try to reduce noise and try to introduce a little bit of film grain. But I'm also noticing that I do not really like how shadows behave, because they're completely crushed. We can unlink them and we can move this shadow slider just a little bit in this direction and then lower it to avoid milky shadows, because I do not really like those. And in the original image we do not really have milky shadows. Yeah, probably something like that. So we are done with the look. Whether it is looking very close to the reference image or not, it's up to you to decide. I think given the footage that we have, it is a quite good match in my opinion, but it's up to you whether you want to watch it, whether you want to use the things that I showed you or not. But anyways, thank you for watching, thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.